Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Memphis, also known as the Church of the River. My name is Lisa Jennings, lay leader for today's service. We are honored to have Rabbi Jeremy Simons as our pulpit guest. A brief introduction. Rabbi Jeremy Simons serves as the Assistant Rabbi at Temple Israel. In this role, Rabbi Simons focuses on leading teen programming in addition to pulpit responsibilities and lifecycle officiation. Prior to joining Temple, he worked as the director of the Hillels at the University of Memphis and Rhodes College, and was director of Rabbinic Services at the Goldring Woldenberg Institute of Southern Jewish Life. Thank you today for joining us, Rabbi. Just a few announcements. We do have assisted hearing devices available. Please raise your hand if you would like to have one. We'll certainly provide this to you to allow you to better experience our worship service. Sanctuary capacity is limited at this time to allow social distancing between people from different households. We also have space available in the Mississippi River Room. Again, according to our guidelines, if you're not fully vaccinated, we hope that you will stay home and watch the Livestream version of the service. Masks in the congregation are still mandatory. And that we have a policy for children in the sanctuary is that they are always welcome, but if they prefer a more comfortable location, the Mississippi River Room is open. We also have a contact form located in the website at the top of the homepage by clicking on the Learn More button, and this is available in advance to avoid signing in at the entrance of the sanctuary, which is also available. We have parking in the Channel 3 lot, as well as spaces in our own parking lot, particularly for our first-time visitors and people who may have difficulty walking from the Channel 3 lot. We have programming for vaccinated children and youth over the age of 5, and please contact our DRE, Cindy Hastings Sakaan, for more information. The Board of Trustees will meet Thursday, February 10th at 6:30 via Zoom. Please contact our president of the board, Christopher Douglas, or Debbie Heath in the office. And today is the first Sunday walk in the park, and those interested will meet at 3 p.m. in the parking lot to walk the River Walk. And today I think our leader is Chris Swinson, so please contact him for more information. The Alliance Group will meet on 3 a.m. via Zoom. Barbara Tharp of Toastmasters International is the featured speaker. And if you'd like more information, either contact Rachel Anderson or Debbie Heath at info@churchoftheriver.org. So please, for more details or any other announcements that may be needed, contact info@churchoftheriver.org. to subscribe to our weekly mailing list and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. With no more announcements, our worship service will now begin. Chalice lighting today. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. At this time, I'll invite our Director of Religious Education, Cindy Sakaan, for Time for All Ages.
I'm happy to do that, Lisa, but I think Debbie has a music offering.
Okay.
Our first reading today comes from the book of Exodus, chapter 25, verses 1 through 8. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Adonai, God, spoke to Moses, saying, "Tell the Israelite people to bring me gifts. You shall accept gifts for me from every person whose heart so moves them. And these are the gifts that you shall accept from them: gold, silver, and copper, blue, purple, and crimson yarns, fine linen and goat's hair, tanned ram skins, dolphin skins, and acacia wood, oil for lighting, spices for anointing oil and for the aromatic incense, lapis lazuli and other stones for setting, for the ephod and for the breastpiece. and let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them. Our second reading comes from the book of 1 Kings, chapter 6, verses 1 through 10. In the 480th year after the Israelites left the land of Egypt, in the month of Ziv, that is the second month, in the 4th year of his reign over Israel, Solomon began to build the house of Adonai. The house which King Solomon built for Adonai was 60 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, 30 cubits high. The portico in front of the great hall of the house was 20 cubits long, along the width of the house, and 10 cubits deep in the front of the house. He made windows for the house, recessed and latticed. Against the outside wall of the house, the outside walls of the house enclosing the great hall and the shrine, he built a storied structure, and he made side chambers all around. The lowest story was 5 cubits wide, the middle one 6 cubits, the third 7 cubits, for he had provided recesses around the outside of the house so as not to penetrate the walls of the house. When the house was built, only finished stones cut at the quarry were used, so that no hammer or axe or any iron tool was heard in the house while it was being built. The entrance to the middle story of the side chambers was on the right side of the house, and the winding stairs led up to the middle chambers, and from the middle chambers to the third story. When he finished building the house, he paneled the house with beams and planks of cedar. He built the storied structure against the entire house, each story 5 cubits high, so that it encased the house with timbers of cedar.
Let us now have a moment of spoken and silent prayer or meditation. Spirit of life, let us be at peace within our heart and our mind. Let us turn inward and become holy ourselves in this one quiet moment. May we be aware of the source of grace common to us all and to all living things. Let us fill our hearts with our own compassion toward ourselves and toward all living beings. Let us pray that we ourselves cease to be the cause of suffering to each other. With humility, with awareness of goodness and the possibilities in life, and of the sufferings that are going on around us and across the world, let us practice community. Let us shepherd peace and love in our hearts on this earth and find wonder. Amen. So we'll accept offering in this day and time. There are two ways to give a donation to the church, your generosity to the church. One, you can text to 901-350-2686. You can certainly go into the order of service that you have and to indicate a donation through our website as well, or through the QR code. So at this moment, we will provide you with the opportunity to support our church and programming. And I'm reminded of the words of Winston Churchill as we take this step. We make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we give. So we very much appreciate your generosity to the church.
It is beyond an honor to be here today. Reverend Sam and I moved to Memphis within a month of each other in 2017. I can remember where we first met. It was the first day of Shelby County schools, and a number of clergy had gone to school, a school with a large number of foreign-born students, in an effort to welcome them. And I remember seeing Sam, the way he interacted with these young students, people he didn't know, and the love on his face. It was the same face he made to me a few years later when, a few days after a tragic shooting at a synagogue in Pittsburgh, Sam came to our solidarity service, where I suspect many of you were too. And I saw the same look in his eyes then. That's the Sam I know. We have been close throughout our time here in Memphis. Whenever I am asked to speak anywhere, it's an honor, often a surprise. But to be asked by Reverend Sam, that's something I have trouble articulating. So when he asked me to be here, I of course said that I would. But I did not say that I would do a good job. More on that later. Sam and I share a few things in common. We've both lived in California, and we've both lived in Massachusetts more than once. But the order was never quite right. After I left Boston, where I studied at a place called Hebrew College, I went to seminary in Los Angeles. And meanwhile, after I had left Boston, that's when he showed up to study at a place called Andover Newton Theological Seminary, literally across the street from Hebrew College. It turns out we had drank coffee at the same Starbucks. We had eaten in the same hole-in-the-wall Thai restaurant in Newton Center, Coconut Cafe. The Tom Kha soup will change your life. I will stand by that. We had all done all of these things in common, but just never at the same time. It wasn't until we were here in Memphis that we finally met. I grew up maybe 30 minutes away from where our paths had crossed in Boston. As a young child, my parents sent me to a preschool about 2 blocks away from my mother's office. It happened that this preschool was in the basement of a church. If I were to count all the times I have stepped inside a church in my entire life, 95% of them, probably more, would have been as a preschooler headed through the door every morning there. When I was about 10, we left the Boston area, and it wouldn't be until after college when I would return again. And naturally, when I did, I went to visit my old hometown, and there in the center of the town was that church. It looked about the same as I had remembered it, except hanging from the enormous white columns was a giant rainbow flag. Having just moved from Ohio in the early 2000s at the time, this was an unusual sight for me. I had not seen a church with a rainbow flag before. What kind of church was this exactly? You can probably suspect where I'm going. I spent the first few years of my life going to a preschool in the basement of the Unitarian Church of Sharon. And while that preschool was secular, I like to think some of those values seeped in from the sanctuary that was directly above my tiny little head. A few days ago here at Temple Israel, we virtually hosted Sally Presand. She was the first female ordained rabbi in America. She received her ordination in 1972. In preparing for today, I did a little research about that Unitarian church in Sharon. Turns out they also employed female clergy, except they beat us by a little bit. Their first female minister took the helm in the 1890s. I have a confession to make. Despite attending a Unitarian preschool, I am not, in fact, a Unitarian. So this left me somewhat stumped about what I was going to talk about today. But fortunately, in the Jewish tradition, we have a guide. We go through the Torah throughout the year, the books Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and we divide them into weekly sections as we progress through the months. So when I was asked earlier this week what I would be talking about, I committed to this week's Torah portion. Except here's the thing. The Jewish Sabbath, Shabbat, well, that's Friday night through Saturday night. That's when we have our services. That's when we give our sermons. And come Saturday night, that's when the cycle resets and we move on to the next week's Torah portion. So at some point Wednesday, I realized that Sunday came after Saturday. But by then, it was too late. Like I said, I am not a Unitarian. And like I said, when I told Reverend Sam I would do this, I never promised I would do it well. So we have studied what is now last week's Torah portion. But that said, last week's Torah portion from the book of Exodus contains one of the most famous lines in the entire Torah. V'asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham, and let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. It's the sort of verse that you see written above synagogue entrances all over the world. A sanctuary, a place of refuge, a place of peace, a place of calm, a place of love, a place of God. But that's what we call a particular room in our buildings. The building itself, it has a different name. We call them synagogues. A synagogue is a Greek word, and it does not mean sanctuary. It means something else entirely. It means a gathering place. And in fact, the Hebrew phrase the Greek is based off of, Beit Knesset in Hebrew, that means literally a house of gathering, not a house of worship or a house of prayer or even a house of God. No, we call our sacred spaces in the Jewish faith, we call them houses of coming together, houses of welcoming each other. Our Reformed Jewish movement has for years had an initiative called Audacious Hospitality. It's aimed to welcome people of all backgrounds to our buildings and our communities. And it's modeled after teachings from our tradition, of stories like when Abraham ran to provide food and drink to strangers passing by his tent, or when Rebecca, pulling water from a well, offered a drink to a thirsty stranger, and then, without the stranger asking, volunteered to water his camels as well. If you remember nothing else from today, let it be this: his camels as well. The camels might feel like an afterthought, like just a nice gesture, like holding open a door for someone. But that's only because we don't, most of us, deal with camels. Do you know how much a camel drinks? The internet told me 20 gallons. And in the story, the stranger, he didn't just have a camel, he had 10 camels. 200 gallons. 1 bucket from the well at a time. That is audacious hospitality. The Jewish American story is one largely of Ashkenazi Judaism. Ashkenazi is a term for Jews who came from Central and Eastern Europe, places like Germany, the Czech Republic, Poland, Russia, Ukraine. The things that most of us think of as Jewish in this country, things like matzah balls or bagels or Yiddish, oy vey, all of that stuff, that isn't Jewish. It's Ashkenazi Jewish. This means Judaism is more than just a set of religious beliefs. It's an entire culture steeped in food, in art, in literature. While there is strength in cultural identity, there is also a downside. For those who don't identify with this particular culture, either because they come from non-Ashkenazi Jewish origins or they are new to Judaism, this kind of cultural identity can create an enormous barrier. Audacious hospitality, at its heart, is about making everyone feel as cared for and seen and cherished as those strangers greeted by Rebekah and Abraham. And let them build me a sanctuary together so that I, God, may dwell among all of them. 3 weeks ago, Rabbi Charlie Citron Walker was preparing for Shabbat morning services when a stranger knocked on his synagogue door. The stranger said he was homeless and he was cold. It was below freezing that morning. Rabbi Citron Walker let him in and he made him a cup of tea. Half an hour later, that same stranger pointed a gun at Rabbi Citron Walker and took him and 3 congregants hostage. The gunman, Malik Faisal Akram, he had come from the UK to America to seek the release of Aifa Siddiqui, who was and is being held in federal prison as a convicted terrorist. I, along with so many others, spent my Shabbat 3 weeks ago being where I wanted to be least, on Twitter and Facebook, constantly refreshing both of those sites for 11 hours until the crisis ended. We know now how it ends. Rabbi Citron Walker took an opportunity to throw a chair at the gunman, and while he was caught off guard, he, along with the congregants, ran out a side door unharmed. We know how it ends now, but we didn't then for those 11 hours. As the hours went by, as the gunman became more erratic, as things looked worse and worse, it seemed like we were about to witness in real time Jews being murdered in their own synagogue, their own gathering place. Again. Read the news, and chances are good on any given day, somewhere someone is being held hostage for some reason. It's a dangerous world, and it's tempting to think that this is but one more example. If you remember one thing from today, let it be about the camels, but if it's 2 things, let this be the other. It is not the same. It's not the same because Akram didn't enter a gas station or a supermarket. He entered a synagogue, and it wasn't by accident. He went to a synagogue and had Rabbi Citron Walker call Rabbi Angela Buchdahl, the senior rabbi at Central Synagogue in New York City, because he believed that she had the power to release federal prisoners, because he believed that Jews control the government. It wasn't going to be a gas station, it wasn't going to be a supermarket, and it wasn't going to be a church. It's been 3 weeks since the attack. The media has long moved on, along with the rest of the country, and that is understandable. But I come here to let you know the Jewish community has not. These last 3 weeks have been filled with security briefings, threat assessments. I'd say I have thought about which of our sanctuary doors I'd run through, but that's not true. I had those thoughts years ago, as has every rabbi, every cantor, and likely every Jewish congregant in this country. Working as a youth director in Boston a few years before I didn't meet Sam there, when I was all of 23 years old, I was given a little clicker button to keep in my pocket. It was the silent alarm for when the gunman came. We have armed security whenever our building is open here and most large synagogues. Memphis, with less than 10,000 Jews, we have a full-time security director for our community. If you ever come to Temple Israel, you'll notice the beautiful trees and landscaping. You may also notice there aren't any bushes anywhere. Nothing that you could hide behind. It's not an accident. I could go on, and I could tell you there are measures in place I've been told that I don't even need to know about. One final example. Every year when we orient our high school religious school teaching assistants, among all the things we have to teach them about how to fool kids into thinking going to extra school on the weekend is fun, we have to teach them where to take the kids when the gunman comes. This is the reality of being Jewish in America. Colleyville, Texas, it was not a wake-up call. It was just another reminder. And the conversation in the Jewish world isn't about how to prevent the next attack. It's about how we're going to respond better when it does come. Because being Jewish in America means you know another attack will come. So what does that have to do with all of you? One of the refrains I've heard in the Jewish community is that it feels like no one else notices or cares when these attacks happen. Now, I don't think that's true. I think it's more like when someone has a death in the family or loses a job. People care. They don't know what to say. So for those with friends in the Jewish community, it's been 3 weeks, but it's not too late to reach out now. And sadly, tragically, you will have other opportunities. Hi, I just want you to know I'm thinking about you. Jewish or not, we live in a dangerous world. There's an impulse to circle the wagons, to batten down the hatches, to choose your metaphor. You can say to ourselves, maybe Abraham was welcoming to strangers in his tent, but that would get you killed today. We tell ourselves things were simpler back then. To which I say, really? Have you read the Bible? We don't have great data on violent crime rates from the time, but it wasn't exactly a peaceful place. No, that sort of thing would have gotten him killed then too. But he did it anyway. I will end by quoting someone far wiser than me. Rabbi Aaron Meyer, both a dear friend and a rabbi in Pittsburgh, where 3 years ago, 11 Jews were murdered in their sanctuary. In his first sermon after Colleyville, said that Rabbi Citron Walker was not a hero for throwing a chair. As he acknowledged, we've all been trained on how to throw chairs. He was a hero, Rabbi Meyer says, because he saw a man who was cold and homeless, and he opened the door, and he offered him tea. You can install all the door locks and camera systems and panic buttons you want, but none of those are going to do a thing for when the stranger knocks on the door and says that they need help. All of those things, they can keep the stranger out, but ultimately you will still have to decide whether to let them in. There is no technological or security solution for that situation. It becomes a moral choice. Do you extend audacious hospitality, or do you not? We know what Abraham did. We know what Rabbi Citron Walker did. We also know what happened. We know what could have happened. But if we want to bring God's holiness into this world, and if we want to make it so future generations live in a world better than the one we have now, well, offering tea may or may not be the solution, but it seems to be the only option we have to make things better. To conclude, if someone gets water for 10 of your camels, marry them. If someone's community is in pain, comfort them. And if someone is at the door, welcome them. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will. As we entered this sanctuary in peace, so may we leave it in peace today. May our worship and fellowship gird us for the week ahead, and may we ever strive to bring holiness into our homes, into our community, to our country, and to our world. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will, and together we say, Amen.